Hello everybody and welcome to a new luck poker video. Today we are going to speak about hand reading and we'll try to understand if it is still relevant nowadays. So a lot of players think that with GTO nowadays it's pretty much pointless to bother yourself with hand reading and to just follow your lines, but I partially disagree. So if you are really trying to play GTO, so you think your opponent is playing optimally and you want to do the same, well, in this case, yes. Playing GTO doesn't require you to do any kind of hand reading. You should just play your range in any given spot, and depending on your opponent's line and sizes, you know which is your best line to take. In this case, you're assuming your opponent is playing GTO, so you know he's perfectly balanced, and therefore all you can do is work on your game. So yeah, your opponent's range doesn't matter. However, in reality, it doesn't happen that frequently, even at relatively high stakes, to play GTO or to try to play perfect GTO. In all these cases, it's gonna be very easy for you to find imbalances in your opponent's ranges. Therefore, knowing how to put your opponent on a range and find these imbalances in these strategies is something really important if you want to increase your win rate, and is something that you should work on. So how do you put your opponent on a range in practice? Putting your opponent on a range is a process of elimination which starts from the preflop, and every time he makes a decision, you are going to eliminate some hands from his range. As an example, let's assume that a regular opens UTG. You can already take away many hands from his range. When he got his card, of course his range was 100%, he could have any two cards, but when he chose to make a raise from UTG, you can eliminate a lot of trash hands, and he is going to mainly have decent hands, like medium to big pocket pairs, broadways, decent with the connectors, and that's pretty much it. Now, assuming that this player receives a 3-bet and he chose to call, now you can eliminate other hands from his range. As an example, he will probably not have an offsuit Broadway hand, because typically a regular do not call with them out of position. But also, you can exclude some of the strongest hands from his range, because usually, if he had a monster hand, he would have made a 4-bet. As you see, every time he makes a decision, you narrow his range to fewer and fewer combos. Something I think it could help you also to hand read better is to focus a lot not on the hands your opponent could have on a given moment, but on the hands he probably doesn't have. As an example, if you open from the button and the big blind calls, you can exclude from his range many strong hands, basically all the hands which are normally 3-bet. And knowing post-flop that your opponent doesn't have hands such as pocket aces, ace king, pocket queens, pocket jacks, and so on, will help you making better reads when he shows aggression on those kind of boards where, to be strong, you need one of those hands. However, I think it's gonna be better for you to see an example of a hand reading process from the pre-flop to the river, so you are going to understand what I'm saying. So this hand was played by me at an L200 zoom. I chose to open from the middle position with Queen Jack suited, pretty standard, and the cutoff chose to make a 3-bet. The hand reading process starts now. This guy, we have only 400 hands on him, but he looks like some kind of regular. At least pre-flop is playing pretty much straightforward. So when he makes this 3-bet, we can start already putting him on a narrower range than any two cards, of course. And basically, what can you say? We can say that if he made a 3-bet, he probably has something like pocket pairs, but decent ones. So probably he doesn't have like low pocket pairs. We can say he's gonna have a decent amount of suited broadways. Of course, he's gonna have monster hands. He's gonna have maybe some of the strongest offsuit broadways hands, and he's gonna have maybe some ace-x suited. This is a standard 3-betting range in this situation, and if he's a regular, I expect him to play this way. So we can assume that probably he doesn't have trash hands, of course. he probably doesn't have a bad offsuit hand, and as we said, he doesn't have probably a low pocket pair. That's already a lot of information that we have here, and they're gonna be useful as we see also later in the hand. Everybody folds. I chose to make the call. I think this hand is close. I think we can both call or fold depending on villain. It's probably typically a mix, and we get to the flop, which is Queen 3-3 with a flush draw. I chose to check, and here start the weird things. He checks back. So the moment he chose to check back, he's already giving us some information in the sense that he's telling us that he's not playing GTO. Why is that? Because if he was playing GTO, he would definitely bet this board, because this board, theoretically speaking, is a bet range, as we can see now quickly on GTO Wizard. This is his range, this is the board. If I check, he should bet range. There is no check, basically, in this situation. So, we know that he's not playing GTO in this spot, so we should be aware that he might have some kind of imbalances in his game. So we should start using some kind of logic here and trying to understand how his range is gonna be after he checks. For example, I think most people here, logically speaking, since, I mean, on this board it's pretty clear that you should bet a lot. I think a regular at these stakes should know that this board is good to see bet with a very wide frequency, and because of that, I think he knows that if he has value, the best way to get value is simply to bet. You know, checking back is not that profitable in general when you have value hand, and betting on this board is gonna give you a decent amount of action. So if he chose to check, I don't think he has a very strong value hand such as aces, kings, ace queen, and hands like that. He might have pocket queens, maybe, because queens is very particular hand here. He has basically the nut, and he blocks a lot of my calling range. But apart from exactly pocket queens, I don't think he's checking here any kind of strong value. Even if he had ace 3, I think it's so easy to bet here for value that it would be a shame if he doesn't. Once he checks, on the other hand, also important is that if he probably had a bluff, I think he would have bet this more often than not if he has no showdown value. Once he checks, I think his range is probably going towards hands such as ace high, things like ace jack, maybe ace king, I don't know. I would probably bluff with that, but who knows. But also mainly some kind of hands with showdown value but not the strong. I would say pocket pairs. Every pocket pair he 3-bet below the pocket queens. I think it could be in his checking range here. So, you know, this check back is something kind of suspicious, something weird, and I think it's very difficult to make it balanced. And if you start with this assumption that he's not balanced here, I think his range is going to look like something like this. So he checks back, turn is the 6, pretty much of a blank card. I chose to bet here for value, about half pot, slightly more. He chose to call. So we know he has some showdown value, so he wasn't giving up on the flop. It wasn't like 8-9 off and then chose to give up the hand. If he checks back on the flop and he calls on the turn, he has something. It can be pocket queens for the top value, as we said. It can be any kind of mid pocket pairs we said so far, all those pairs from 7s through jacks. I think he might play this way if he chose to check the flop. And something important is that he probably doesn't have pocket 6s, not for the call, because if he had pocket 6s, I think calling there would be fine, and that's what I would expect more often than not. But I don't expect him to have pocket 6s, mainly because of the 3-bet preflop. Remember, when he 3-bet preflop, we excluded low pocket pairs from his range. So the moment he calls here, I'm not thinking of pocket 6s. I already removed them from his range, and I'm not considering that combo anymore. Then we get to the river, which is a king of spade. Here I chose to make a very thin value bet. That's also because I thought he would c-bet on the flop more often than not when he had a flush draw. That's something he didn't mention, but also if he had a flush draw, I think he would c-bet here more often than not. And I think if he had those kind of mid pocket pairs, I could get some team value here. I don't like to bet big because I think it's just pointless. If I bet like 65, he's just gonna call if he has at least a king, and of course I'm not gonna get any value here. The weird thing is that this guy chose to make a huge raise here, and that's where things get really suspicious, because we said that he probably doesn't have pocket sixes, he probably doesn't have pocket threes, only one combo there is, of course, also, but he's probably not rebetting that. So his value range here is basically, I think, mainly queens, which is, again, one combo. Even pocket kings, we excluded pocket kings on the flop when he checked back, so we are not worried about pocket kings. He probably doesn't have pocket kings, and I don't think he has king queen, both because I think king queen would bet more often than not on the flop. Is strong enough to bet, I think, even from somebody who is sometimes betting and sometimes checking. But also, most importantly, I don't think anybody would raise this big here on this river with king queen when he can lose from, of course, a flush and eventually also full houses. So when he shoves here, his range is more capped. He's trying to wrap like a full house or nothing, I think. Even a flush, I'm not sure it's gonna raise this big on a pair board. Plus, of course, what I said, that I don't think he has that many because he checked on the flop. So if his value range is that narrow, I think here we can also go for the call. Blocking the queens, of course, here is a big thing. And since it's the main value hand we identified in this range. And since I can only see one value combo here, I found the call here. It's likely, I don't know, maybe he's turning something into bluff or he's doing some weird things, who knows? And I end up calling, and he had a weird bluff at the end. He probably thought that if I bet small on the river, I do not have a very strong hand, which was fine, of course, which was correct. But he didn't consider that I wouldn't put him on a strong range at all with the line he took. And that's an example of how hand reading works and how we can make some pretty sick calls with hand reading. Of course, hand reading is not a precise science. You can make mistakes, you can have wrong assumptions. This guy may have misclicked on the flop with pocket kings, who knows? But it's not something, that you get 100% right. It's just, it follows the law of the big numbers. So it's enough if you are right more often than not. And if you make a mistake, it happens. If he shows up with, a flush, then we'll make a note, and next time we'll know what he's checking back on this kind of board. But it's important to stick to your reads, because that's how you improve. And it's very important to hand read a lot when you do hand review, because that's when you have all the time of the world to improve your thinking processes and to make practice. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. It's free and you get notified when I will post a new content. Thanks for watching and see you next time.